Good evening and welcome to the April 14th meeting of the Sherwood School Board. I'll call us to order. Please stand, and Ainsley, would you lead us in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll start with the consent agenda. Has everyone had a chance to look at the materials? Is there a motion regarding the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move we adopt the consent agenda as presented.
A second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Reports. Superintendent Dr. Cordy.
Good evening. So this evening, I have a lot of exciting news to share with you. A lot of progress has been made since we met last. 2 weeks ago, I got to meet with my Superintendent Student Advisory Team, which, as you likely remember, is a group of high school students representing every grade level. And we met via Zoom and had a wonderful conversation about what their plans were about either returning to in-person or remaining in the cloud campus. And it was just, it's always the highlight of my week and oftentimes my month when I get to spend time with students. And that group is just an amazing, articulate, and thoughtful group of students, and shared their hopes, some of their concerns, some of their thoughts and questions about the next steps. And so it was a wonderful, wonderful time. Last Friday was the first chamber networking Zoom call that has taken place in many months, and I participated in that. It was great to get to connect with our business community again, and I had the opportunity to give a school district update. So it was great seeing folks in that way again, too. As you all know, several months ago, one of our beloved elementary principals, Tim Smith, announced that he would be retiring at the end of this and be done as a principal at the end of this school year, moving on to whatever is next in his journey. And we will be honoring him and other retirees at some point before the school year is complete. But tonight I want to talk a little bit about him. Just as a reminder, he started in the Sherwood School District in 2008. So he's been part of our Sherwood School District family for 13 years. He has the unique distinction of having served as principal at 3 of our 4 elementary schools. He is truly the consummate professional. The heart, his heart for kids and their families shows in everything that he does and all who he is. He's a caring and very thoughtful supervisor and the ultimate team player. He's so loyal and so caring. And I've heard so many adults say over the years in different ways that, and this is a quote that I've heard multiple times, but that you feel wrapped in a big hug after spending time in a conversation with Mr. Smith. And I think I see lots of heads shaking, and I think we all know what that looks like and feels like. We are excited for him. It's for sure a loss for our administrative team and our district, our Archer Glen community. Hard shoes to fill. But we've recently gone through the process to identify the next principal of Archer Glen Elementary, and we had parent, classified and certified staff, administrators, all participating in a very rigorous process. And a familiar face to many of us rose to the top in that process, Patrick Shekaro, who is currently serving as Forest Hills Elementary Principal in Lake Oswego for the last 3 years. But before that, he was in Sherwood for 11 years. He started teaching here. He was a 3rd grade teacher, then an instructional coach. He was a district office administrator. And we've made those formal announcements and have been receiving such great feedback about that selection. And we'll be introducing him formally as well at an upcoming board meeting. So excited to get to share that. And we will be, as I said, continuing to honor Mr. Smith when he can be here with us as well. Last but certainly not least, we now have grades 6 through 8 on campus for in-person instruction. Saw many board members at so many of the first days over the course of the last month, and that's very much appreciated. Next week is high school. And later tonight in our information and discussion section of the board meeting, we're going to be giving you an update on the return to in-person instruction, and we'll be talking a lot about that. And also just really important to note that our plans for next fall are that all students are going to be returning every day, full time, and that we're super excited to be targeting next fall in that way, including a robust summer learning option that's being designed and really thought about in a way to offer not only academic supports for students, but equally as important, if not more, just those social emotional supports and the connections with their peers that so many have been missing out on. And so that concludes my report. Thank you for the opportunity. And with that, I'll turn it back to Chair Allen.
Great, thank you. Next up, ASB Student Representative Ainsley.
Good evening. Today I am very excited because, as Dr. Corey said, a lot of people have been going to school, and I have been at the middle schools helping with a little group of high schoolers, helping people get around, which has been really fun. And we got to do orientation, seniors got to do orientation yesterday and walk around. And in one of my classes today, they were like, okay, what'd you think? And then they were like, oh my gosh, was that confusing? And it was so pretty. It was so much more scenic than I thought it would be, and all of this stuff. And so I'm really excited. You guys obviously did a really good job planning the building. And along with that, sports have been picking up, and I cannot tell you how excited I am. Like, we're finally, which you guys know this, but we're finally allowed to have spectators, and it has been amazing to finally be in the student section again and just to scream at the top of our lungs and then wake up Saturday with a raspy voice. Like, oopsies, that sounds terrible, but man, did I miss it. So now it is the spring sports, which is track, baseball, softball, and I think that's it. But tennis. And it's really cool to go by and just like look and see everyone playing again. It like warms. I'm literally gonna cry right now because of how happy it makes me. But we're doing awesome. The end of the quarter is on Friday. Today we had our period 2 final, and so tomorrow is period 3, and then so on. It's been really nice to just have one period a day, just to like really be able to focus on your next class. So we're all having a good time at the high school. So
Great, thank you, Ainsley. Next up, SCA, Mr. Pace.
Good evening, everyone. Superintendent Cordy, Chair Allen, and directors, thank you for...
Is his mic on?
Okay, sorry about that. All right, is that better? All right, so first of all, I just want to say it's great to be able to join you all in person here tonight. It's kind of crazy to think what's happened over the last year, and it really feels like things are in motion. We're really moving forward in a lot of different areas. So my report's going to be pretty short for you tonight, but I want to just give you a little bit of feedback. What we're hearing from some teachers now that we're back to in-person learning. So as you know, our elementary kids have been back for a few weeks now, and we just heard a lot of positive feedback. The main thing we're hearing from teachers is we're just so happy to see kids and have them in front of us. So we also saw really good results with the planning that went in ahead of time for the rollout of the 2 half days with having half your class one day and half the next. Teachers really appreciated having that time with smaller groups of kids to get them kind of trained up with our new classroom procedures that we are going to be having. And now that we're a few weeks in, we're seeing kids really starting to kind of settle in now that we're used to those routines. And kind of like the high school, kids are just happy to see each other. We're seeing them starting to loosen up a little bit. My own kids in my classroom the last couple of weeks are starting to get a little more lively and engaging a little more, which has been a lot of fun to see. And as you know, our middle school colleagues are just in the midst of getting started with their hybrid model. But again, we heard from them too that even in their orientation week last week, teachers were just happy to see kids back in front of them having in the building. And we do want to acknowledge the work that's being done still to get our last group, the high school, back into the building next week. We know they've done a lot of work and are in that last push to get kids back in to have a strong finish to the school year. And then last of all, I just want to let you know that we are still continuing to meet bi-weekly with our district leaders. And we appreciate that collaborative process that we've had all year just to have dialogue and discussions with them so that we can take care of things as they come up. And we appreciate that collaborative process that we've had and will continue to do for the rest of this year as we have a strong finish to the school year. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Don't think we have OSEA tonight, and I know we don't have city council. That will move us on to information and discussion, starting with social studies course change.
Good evening, Director Allen, Dr. Cordy, Board of Directors. Sorry, let's try this again. Tonight, we're excited to bring to you a high school social science credit adjustment. This is actually a change to our graduation policy. This comes to you after a process we went through, which Marlene and Sarah, who I'll introduce in a second, will explain more to you in just a minute, from last spring. The high school team, I just want to sing some praises of Marlene and Sarah here and just of the high school team for the adoption process they went through. They took a really in-depth look at their standards. They remapped their standards. They looked at the new required social studies standards that are coming out and really took a hard look at their course structure and made some really innovative, thoughtful changes which allow us to meet those requirements and really make a better experience for kids. And so I just want to thank them for their work. And in that, I'll turn it over to Sarah and Marlene. I do want to introduce, I know you've met Sarah McCusker in person before, but this is in virtual before, but now she's in person in our meeting. So I'd like to welcome Sarah. She's a new TOS in our department. She's doing some great work and really excited to have her on the team. And Marlene Carroll is now as our Associate Director, soon to be Interim Director of Curriculum and Instruction. And I'd like to introduce them to take this on. So Marlene and Sarah, it's all you.
All right. Good evening, Dr. Cordy, Board Chair Allen, and Board of Directors. Do you want me to click? Okay. Okay. So as you may remember, last year we went through a social studies core adoption where we mapped out all the standards and we chose a new curriculum. And when we went through that process, we really determined that we were missing some essential core standards. And that was from the ethnic studies, the Oregon history standards, and most of our geography standards. And so we had to go back through and look at our core classes and realign the structure and the system of the core classes. And Sarah, who is now our secondary teaching and learning TOSA, she really took the lead in that work as the department coordinator. And she's going to walk us through the process that the team went through one more time, just as a reminder. And then she's going to walk us through the proposal of the credit adjustment. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Cordy, Board Chair Allen, and Board of Directors. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you tonight about these changes. I'm very excited about this work. I think we're about the 3-year mark maybe of working on this, and I'm really excited to see it come to fruition and start to be implemented in the high school. Last year was our most productive work of this process. We had some work days where we identified the changes that needed to be made. based on the standards that we weren't really addressing to the level that needed to be addressed. And when we looked at that, we really realized that we needed to change our course structure and include an additional half credit, so one more class section in the social studies core. We also were able to adopt curriculum and textbooks for all these classes last year that we're very excited about, and we think are going to be much better materials to meet student needs in a variety of ways, but that will allow us to teach these standards in a much more engaging and student-focused way. So this is the sort of summary of the changes that we believe should be made. We would be introducing 3 new social studies courses, which would be taught over 5 sections. And we would be over time removing 2 courses, which are taught over 4 sections. So we're basically just changing the core. This would require an additional 0.5 social studies credit to be required for the Sherwood diploma. It would not require a change in the number of credits for students who are receiving the honors or advanced honors diploma, because currently they already are required to receive an extra half credit of social studies. We're simply changing how they earn that half credit. So I'd like to go into a little bit more detail about what this looks like. What you see right now is the path that students take if they're on a regular path. They're not interested in taking advanced placement courses. This is the standard path to graduation. On the left is the existing path that our students take in grades 9 through 11. As freshmen, they take 2 trimesters of world history. And as sophomores, they take 2 trimesters of US history. What we noticed when we looked at these courses really closely is a couple of problems with this course structure. One thing we noticed is that a lot of our freshmen struggle in world history. They're covering really complex topics like world wars and communism and fascism, and that can be a lot to cover in your freshman year. We also felt like these classes did not adequately cover some of our standards. As Marlene mentioned, we really were not doing an adequate job teaching geography. We were not teaching the multicultural or ethnic studies standards that are new additions to the Oregon State standards. And really, we did not feel we were doing an adequate job teaching history outside of the United States and Europe. And so when we looked at the possibility of how we could rearrange the core, we came up with a proposal that would have students take classes across 3 years instead of just 2. So under our proposal, freshmen would take 1 trimester of human geography. Their sophomore year, they would take 1 trimester called Europe and the Modern World. And their junior year, they would take a 3 trimester long class on US history. And this allowed us to not only cover the standards we weren't covering, but do a better job of covering all the standards. Under this proposal, freshmen would start high school with a really engaging, exploratory, and project-based course that we think will get them really excited about learning about the world. It's also only 1 trimester, which means freshmen schedules will open up and allow them to take another elective. Right now, freshmen have a very core heavy load, so we think this is better for students to get to explore their interests earlier on. We think that overall, the class topics are better aligned with students' age and maturity, so that when they are getting into those more complex topics, they're a little bit older, their reading skills and comprehension skills and writing skills have improved that much more. And as I mentioned, we're able to more adequately cover the new standards across a variety of courses and really make sure that our students are meeting all of those requirements from the state of Oregon. In terms of our students who do want to challenge themselves with advanced placement classes, we think this proposal does a better job for them as well. Currently, again, freshmen take world history, and then a lot of sophomores elect to take AP European history. And then junior year, the most popular course is AP US history. There are some problems with this current alignment. AP European history is our largest AP course at the high school. This year, there were 7 sections of it. However, 2 out of the 3 trimesters, students are just receiving elective credit. They're not actually working towards graduation. After AP Euro, some students choose to go back to the regular path, which is fine, of course, but What that means is that they are now juniors with AP experience in a regular level sophomore course, and they're just not getting the rigor that they need. So under our proposal, again, freshmen would start with human geography, and then as sophomores, if a student chose to go into AP European history, they would actually be able to get credit that's helping them towards graduation in the social studies area all 3 trimesters. Their junior year, again, some might choose to go on to AP US history, but if they choose to go back to the regular level, they're now taking a 3 trimester long US history course with juniors, no matter which direction they choose. So we think that the level of rigor and critical thinking that that class is going to allow is going to be a better match for all of our students. So if we look at the major difference in terms of graduation requirements, this would be the actual change to the board policy that would be necessary. Again, on the left, these are the graduation requirements that would continue to be the graduation requirements for the class of 2024 and before, where they have a credit of world history, US history, 0.5 government, 0.5 economics. I should have mentioned we're not making any changes to the senior level courses. Government and economics remain the requirements for senior year. Currently, if you are a student aiming for the honors or advanced honors diploma, you need a half credit of the social science elective. The proposal, which would go into place for the class of 2025 and beyond, which is next year's freshmen, would be the existing requirements plus the additional half credit of social science analysis, which most students would earn either through the 3rd trimester of regular US history or in one of the trimesters of AP European history. There's actually a few different ways they can earn that credit. They can follow a regular path, an AP path, a mixed path, and they're able to earn those credits. So as you can see, it actually doesn't change the number of electives required for the advanced or honors diploma. It just has 1 less elective if you are going for the Sherwood diploma. However, again, you actually get an opportunity to take 1 more elective your freshman year. So we think that that trade-off ends up working out pretty well for our students. And that is the end of my information, but I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions? Jessica?
So if we can go back to, or just in general, I think we sometimes use a lot of language when we're here at the board meeting that may not make sense to our friends watching at home. And so recognizing that we have friends watching at home, when we talk about standards and state standards, those are standards set either by the legislature or by the Department of Education. Those aren't standards that we choose here. They're standards we're required to comply with in order to receive state funding. Is that right?
Exactly. The Department of Education at the state level develops these standards. Every several years, they go through a process where they revisit them. So currently, we have standards that were adopted in 2018. And what we noticed in 2018 was that when we got those new standards, we were meeting a lot of the requirements that the state was giving us. But as I mentioned, there were a few areas, including especially geography, that the way our current course structure was set up, we just weren't able to meet that. And it is a requirement that we teach the standards that the state gives us. That's what determines what we can teach. And so we want to make sure that we are meeting those requirements as they set them.
So these adjustments that we're making or that we're discussing to make are absolutely necessary for our students to be able to receive a diploma and for us to be in compliance with state requirements.
Exactly. Yes. Right now, it's we're not really teaching the standards the way that we should be with our current structure. We really need to realign this so that we're able to meet those requirements.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Other questions? Mike?
So I just wanted to thank you for your work here. I think this is a real improvement with what we're offering. It expands the scope of social studies, and then it moves more of the core work in the junior year, which will be a more rigorous course. So they'll be able to go in more deeply and do more critical thinking. So I think this is a really good improvement, and I really appreciate the work that you've done here. Thank you.
Sue?
Yeah, and I do like the idea of having another elective for freshman year. I remember that was kind of a brutal year. So I'm excited to get some of those students engaged in other opportunities because there are so many at the high school. And so So thank you for making this work better for students.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, yes, Ainsley.
2 questions. So right now we have a lot of history electives. Will we still have those?
Absolutely.
Oh,
Yes.
goody. And then, so junior year is usually pretty tough. And I know that that is when personally I started taking a lot of AP classes. And so I'm just worried about the course load because either way, they're going to be taking 3 trimesters of history, which kind of pulls back on because they have to take English, they have to do math, they have to do science. And so, or maybe they don't have to do, I don't remember, but I'm worried about the mental health aspect because of the load of just classes, which I totally agree, world history, not for me, and a lot of other students. So I'm really glad we're getting rid of that because that was not a thing that I would go back to. But I really like the geography idea because I really feel like I learned about where things were in 5th grade. Haven't really talked about it since, so that would be a nice little refresher. But again, I am worried about how junior year would be because people say that usually junior year is the hardest, and that's without a full year of history. So just a little.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a great point. I think that, right now, one thing to remember is, as you mentioned, by junior year, a lot of students are taking AP courses, and a lot of our juniors do take AP US history. And so that is a really popular course. It's actually a dual credit course now at the high school. And so students are able to have 2 different opportunities for credit. And we anticipate that course is going to continue to be really popular with juniors. One of the goals we had is to just better align, like I said, kind of make it an experience where all juniors were having a similar experience. So juniors in general are having a year of US history where they're able to kind of learn more about different aspects of US history instead of the smaller scope that we have right now. And by opening up the opportunity for more electives your freshman and sophomore year. Right now, when you look at the classes that are required, a lot of those electives do happen junior and senior year. So by shifting some of your electives into freshman year and sophomore year, hopefully the counterbalance of that is going to open up some more room in that junior year schedule to then just shift where those classes are taking place.
So will like World War II Holocaust and then Native American history, will you be allowed to take those freshman year? Because I feel like those are also really heavy subjects.
Yeah, so one of our goals is to reduce prerequisites for all of our courses. We really want to make sure that if a student wants to take a course, they have that ability. So one of the things the department did this spring was, I still say we, is really look closely at what the prerequisites are for different courses to make sure that they really were aligned with is this really a logical prerequisite that needs to exist? And we're also looking at expanding our elective offerings all the time and looking at, what are our elective offerings and should we teach different classes? And so I think that the popular electives that we have now, we want to keep running, but we're also looking to see is there another course that we could offer that would be really engaging and maybe something that would be a good choice for freshmen and sophomores that want to continue to explore the social studies beyond the core.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is an update on fields and facility use. Mr. Rose.
Thank you, Chair Allen, Superintendent Cordy, and members of the board. Tonight, I wanted to give you an update on where we're at with fields and facilities use, particularly now that those services have been under our management since July 1. We'll cover a few topics here this evening. As always, feel free to ask questions as we go, or I'll have time at the end as well. In keeping with our kind of COVID guidelines, we are currently basically only renting our outside facilities. As indoor rentals become feasible for us, we will begin that process also. One area of concern with indoor rentals is just the weekend opening and closing of those, and then also cleaning protocols between teams. And as those ease up, again, we'll reevaluate those pieces. Primarily our rentals right now are to local youth sports, baseball, softball, and lacrosse for the most part. We do have some rentals to Sherwood Youth Football, which is doing a spring flag league. And then Sherwood Soccer is not doing a spring league this year, so we're not actually renting to them at all. We have put in place a scheduling priority. This is similar to what we've done in the past with our district use coming first. So if the high school needs their fields, they get first crack at that. And then it rolls over to our local youth programs to schedule their field needs. And after that, we open it up to the general public and others filling in with whatever time slots happen to be left. As you know, we're using the Facilitron scheduling system, and that does a couple things for us. One, it schedules our fields and facilities, but it's also our maintenance and custodial work order system. And so that allows us to tie the two together. And so if there is a maintenance need related to a field or related to a gymnasium, we can tie those two together and make sure that we're addressing those adequately. In that system, users set up an account with a documentation of their category. The category is related to, it's how we do the scheduling. So category 1 is our own use. Category 2 are the local nonprofit youth organizations. Category 3 is for adult recreation. And then category 4 is our general kind of population, out of town users, those kinds of folks as well. We do open those reservations just 3 months ahead of time. And that's, again, to make sure that our own needs are met. And so that way high school can schedule out their needs for soccer or for basketball or whatever indoor use they might have. And then once we open it up to the public and allow for the outside reservations, that process goes through our district team to make sure that, again, we don't have any conflicts with the high school or other school uses. One piece of that application process or that reservation process is that insurance is required for all outside users. Facilitron will sell a registered user insurance if they need it, and then payment is due up front. If by chance the reservation is canceled, that money is refunded at that time through the system.
Jim, quick question.
Sure.
So can you go into a little more detail about the preference issue? So we open up 3 months ahead, and at that point, all the school uses are already scheduled, right?
Yes.
So then how does it work from there that makes sure that local youth sports have the next priority?
So Ken can jump in if I misspeak here, but essentially we let our local youth groups know that the scheduling is now open for them and allow them to go in and schedule their large blocks of time. And then the time that's left over is open to the general public after that.
So it's open to youth only 3 months out and then opens to others after that?
Yeah, cool, sorry. So what we do is it's open to everyone at that time, but we send out an email reminder to our youth sports organizations letting them know it's open. And then we don't approve any of our outside users until we had those fields. So for example, this spring, we had a out-of-town soccer club make a reservation. That sat in the queue for, we told them that we wouldn't be doing that until our 3 local organizations had completed their reservations. Once they had completed them, there was too many conflicts to approve, and so we declined their reservation. So that's essentially how it works.
Great, thank you. Eric, do you have a question? Great, thank you.
So this has been an interesting year for us and has resulted in some scheduling challenges, as Ken just mentioned. For one, we are having multiple sports using the fields at the same time when typically they wouldn't have that conflict. So we have marching band, lacrosse, and football all using the fields at the same time that we have track and field, baseball, and softball. And that's in part because OSAA has removed the restrictions as to what time of year individual sports can practice. And so we have a large number of kids taking part in our activities. and scheduling of those has been a little bit challenging. And we typically wouldn't see that in a normal year. Having said that, our space for our youth sports has increased, and you'll see here in just a moment on the next slide that a demonstration of that. And not surprisingly, our turf fields, now that we have multiple turf fields, are in high demand. Obviously, we have rain in Oregon, and those turf fields are very valuable when things are wet outside. One issue we do have, and this is a nature of the way we have kind of priced out our fields, is that we have leagues signing up for fields and then not using them. And given that we have a per user fee structure and not a per hour structure, there's no incentive for them not to do that. And so that's an issue that we get to look at over the coming months and see if there's a way to help with that piece. So here's an example of the increased availability. Our senior baseball fields were available for roughly 20 slots Monday through Friday in years past. That was predominantly at the former high school, now middle school. And those slots were all available after our high school team got done for the day, and then our youth sports could play. This year, there are actually 3 fields available, which makes for 30 time slots Monday through Saturday, because our high school teams are now practicing at the new high school, and so all of those that are currently at SMS are now available to our youth. Similarly, the batting cages at SMS, last year there were about 15 hours that were available for youth sports use, and now that the high school teams are using their high school facilities, we have an additional 7 hours at the middle school that's available for community local youth sports use. So pricing. And we are hearing there's some kind of misunderstandings about the pricing model that we're using. The district's fee structure is in fact based on a per hour charge for each field, regardless of the number of participants. There's no charge obviously for our own use. And then there's a scaled charge based on which category folks are in for grass fields and turf fields. You can see the numbers here. However, as we made that transition from the city managing our facilities and managing the scheduling to the district doing it, we committed to continuing their pricing structure of $15 per user for sports. That's predominantly, again, for our local youth sports organizations. The exception to that is our turf fields, where we do charge for those fields at the rate that you've seen. And the city was expected to do that to help fund the joint turf replacement fund that was intended to help cover the cost of those turf fields. In addition, this year, we gave the baseball, the local youth baseball and the local youth softball opportunities to kind of work off some of their fees, because as we were trying to get ready for the spring, we recognized the fields weren't in the condition we wanted them to be in. And with their help, we were able to make a lot of those needed improvements to those fields. The reality is that our per user fee is great for groups that don't have a lot of kids on a field at one time and use a lot of hours. And then it's not so great for those that have lots of kids but don't use as many hours. And so there's really something there that we need to be looking at long-term, kind of an equity question between different sports groups. And then again, the fact that we have some leagues that are signing up for fields that they don't then actually show up and use, and that limits our ability to rent to other groups that are willing to pay that could help subsidize the cost for all of us.
Just a quick comment as we think about that going forward. I think one of the things we need to be sure is part of our calculation is what's the field cost that flows through to the kid participating in the sport, to make sure that we don't upset the calculus around that, because things that, you know, on the way in look like they could be equitable could end up being really inequitable on the backside. And so it's really important, I think, we make sure that that's part of the lens that we use.
Certainly.
Jessica.
And I really think it's also important that we engage our youth sports teams, as well as potentially some of the outside folks, to really make sure that up front before anything ever kind of gets to us, that there's a robust conversation occurring in the community with those users so that there's no surprises.
Absolutely. And we also need some time to actually go through kind of a normal year to determine what are the uses of the fields, what are the costs associated with maintaining those. Because I think we have a really good idea of those, but we also need some time to kind of see is that were our projections accurate? Were the use hours there that we expected? And then start to look at, okay, how do we make this kind of calculus work? And again, the reason we kept with the $15 per student or per participant, the way the city did, was to in fact not cause our local youth groups to suddenly have expensive bills that they couldn't afford, or to just drastically change their own pricing structure for students.
Jessica.
I'm also really sensitive, given this time, our experience maybe with groups that scheduled time on fields and didn't show up. Do we know that that's a regular practice, or do we suspect that there may be some sense that there's, if somebody's not feeling well that day and the practice gets unscheduled? I mean, at this time, that's kind of what we want to have happening. So whether that's in part because of COVID behaviors, or whether that's an ongoing regular practice, seems like something we need to get our arms around too.
Yes, that's certainly part of the kind of, we need to watch what this even next year looks like, because it's going to continue to be different than it would have been in a non-pandemic time frame. Certainly. And then also just kind of want to bring you up the cost to the district includes facilities maintenance, mowing, the lining of the fields, some equipment like bases, goals, nets, those kinds of things, water. There's a number of expenses related to owning and operating these fields. And, as an example, this spring, we've spent about $20,000 just getting the baseball field and the baseball fields and the softball fields up and ready to play on. So here's a quick example of one of our local youth sports groups and their use this spring. This is for the Sherwood Junior Baseball Organization. They've scheduled a little over 5,100 hours of field time. Now, keep in mind, that's across many buildings with many fields at some of those buildings. And then based on their expected number of teams with 12 players each, we expect roughly 250 users at $15 per participant. It's around $3,750. In addition, they're one of the groups that was able to work off some of their fees by completing basic field maintenance to the tune of $3,000. So their total balance for about 5,000 hours of use is going to be about $750 this year. I'd also remind you, we've spent about $20,000 to get those fields playable. And that does, the $20,000 doesn't include mowing, watering, and some of those basic maintenance needs. So speaking of mowing and landscape needs, I think you're all aware that we had a request for proposals to start up with a new landscape maintenance company. We are in the final negotiations of a contract with a local company for that. We're very excited about their work, and we expect them to be on board and starting May 1. And then we do need some additional support for our performance fields, meaning baseball, football, soccer, those fields. Things like deep tine aeration, slice seeding, and some of the really kind of specific to sports fields maintenance. And so we're looking for an additional company that can help us with those services. We think we have a company and a means to hire them. And we also expect them to be on board by the beginning of May as well. And with that, I would open it up to additional questions.
Other questions? Yeah, Eric.
I think I just had just a kind of a quick comment and just kind of say that we have some excellent facilities here, and especially with all the bond work that we did. And you look at the taxpayers are paying for these things, and we want to be able to deliver value back to them so that we can have these opportunities for our kids so they can be affordable and accessible to all kids. Because we look at the community involvement that it brings, it kind of sports always just kind of brings everybody together. just like our schools bring everybody together. So I know we're going to be running into some issues as we kind of work through these transitions, but I think we have a good track record of reaching out to our groups and talking with them and coming to a equitable solution. So I'm kind of excited about how we're going to be working on this going forward.
Yeah.
And I did have one quick question, and that was as far as we talked about, you know, mowing and maintenance of it, but as far as district staff involved in the scheduling and keeping track of, you know, who's using the fields, is that a significant amount of time?
I will actually direct that question to Ken, because Ken's been the one, along with Caitlin from my office and Cheryl from his office, that has done kind of the vast majority of the Facilitron work. And so I think he can answer that better than I can.
I think it's really busy during the beginning of each season, and then it kind of pares down to about 2 or 3 hours a week. But in that sort of that first week or two of each season, when that scheduling time opens, it's been fairly busy. But then it really on an ongoing weekly basis is 2 to 3 hours of work for scheduling. So Facilitron does so much of the work for us in terms of that, the program and the staff at Facilitron.
It automates so much of the work, and especially the piece like making sure the insurance is there and making sure payment is made. Those are all things that the system does, that if we didn't have that system, Ken and Cheryl and Caitlin would be chasing down. So it's certainly, being an automated system has decreased the amount of people time that's required to support it.
Yeah, I remember back in the day when I was reserving classrooms, not classrooms, but gyms and events and stuff for, like, when I was leading the Cub Scout troop here for a while. And it was a lot of back and forth between, you know, getting all of our forms in, our insurance in, and getting all that stuff in place. And I guess that's part of the reason I was asking the question, is because I think it was very manual intensive, and it seems like, you know, moving it to a web-based program is going to kind of be beneficial for everybody involved.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Sue.
So obviously it's kind of our first go around with Facilitron and all the adjustments that have been made. Do we think that this will actually get streamlined as groups that, you know, are users each year or each season kind of get used to the program and know exactly how to do things?
Yeah, I think that both a second year and a normal year will make a big difference. Like this spring has just been so chaotic because all the seasons are overlapping with each other, and some sports are literally playing outside of their season. And so that just made it really challenging because we're trying to divide up usually just within like 5 sports, but right now we have like 9 sports going. And so just doing that division has made it more challenging, both for them to figure out which fields they can get and for us to try and equitably divide those up.
Any other questions? All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Next up is an update on back to in-person instruction. Dr. Cordy.
All right, thank you. While Mr. Bennett is headed up to the lectern, I'll go ahead and set the stage for our conversation on this topic this evening. We are going to be sharing with you an analysis that we've done of 7 other districts in the Portland metro area, in addition to Sherwood. Really want to just take a second and thank the team members on the teaching and learning team who have spent a lot of time really scouring websites and other various forms of information to extract the numbers that we're going to be sharing with you tonight. We're going to be looking at average hours per day, days per week, and days in person. So that'll be the first portion of the update. We'll then share with you the changes and updates that have been made recently to the Ready Schools Safe Learners Guidance. But in addition to talking about some of those changes, we also really think it's important to talk about the things that haven't changed, but that still remain critical in determining the hybrid instruction model. And all of those things factor into the decisions that we've made around really holding true to the hybrid in-person model that folks have worked so hard to create, and following that model for the remainder of the school year while we engage in conversations about how to bring additional students, our most vulnerable students, onto campus for additional time. That will be the next part of our conversation. And again, when we talk about what's next at the conclusion of this portion of the agenda, again, just real excited to talk about the fall and expecting all students back full-time. But we also are engaging in conversations around possibilities related to the cloud campus and what that could look like for those families and students where that has really met a need. And so those are the focus topics for our conversation this evening. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, Dr. Cordy. Here's the overview that Dr. Cordy just shared with you. Before we jump into this, I do want to really thank our teams for all the work they've done around bringing kids back to school. There's been a lot of work from teachers, from principals, from different instructional leaders, district office administrators. And I've seen this pattern emerge among our building administrators anyway, where the elementary principals were at this point where every time I talked to them, they were stressed and they were tense and they were working night and day trying to get things open, and the kids walked in and the joy returned like that. And then the next level, the same thing happened with the middle school. I'd have a meeting with them and their brows were furrowed and they were all stressed and working really hard, excited to get kids back, but working really hard. And the kids walked in the door and their countenance changed. And I'm looking forward to that happening at the high school too. It's just been such a great thing to welcome these kids back and just see what the impact it's had on people and just the work that our teams went through. And I just wanted to acknowledge that before we jumped in. So the first thing we're going to share with you tonight is an analysis of some in-person instruction hours. And I want to talk a little bit about how we calculated these numbers, just so you're clear on kind of what's in here and what isn't. As Dr. Cordy said, this was quite a process our team went through. I really want to take a minute to thank our team for the work that they did. I thought it would take them a few hours. It took them a few days to really calculate this because, they would find contradicting information on websites, one post from January, one from April, one from March, and it would be called the school district to find out what the actual numbers were at each level. And so there was a lot of that went on. And so they put a lot of work into this. And these numbers are, we put a lot of work into the accuracy of these numbers. But again, there was a lot of contradicting information out there, and making sure we had the most recent. We worked really hard to do that. But I just want to put that on the table, that was a real challenge. Just what's in these numbers. We just looked at the hours that the school students were in person during the day. We didn't subtract lunch. We didn't separate out recess or passing time. We didn't count arrival and dismissal procedures. Just when did the school day start and when did the school day end? That's what's in here. How many hours are they officially in class? That's what these are. We also made some choices around categorizing the numbers. Some school districts opened kindergarten and then 3 days later first grade and then a few days later second grade. Some opened K-5 all at once. Some opened K-3 and then 4-6. So when we broke the numbers down, we broke them into categories. We did K-1, then all of elementary, then middle school, then high school. So those 4 categories, and we just had to pick a way to do it. So when did you get your K-1 kids in? When all your elementary, that was sort of the methodology there. And when we chose the districts to go after, we chose, of course, all our Washington County districts. A couple other districts were regularly compared to in Clackamas County, close to us, in Westland, Wilsonville, and Lake Oswego. And then a couple of East Side districts. We didn't explore all the East Side districts, but generally they looked similar. We didn't go in detail on the other ones, but they looked similar to what these districts we shared here did. And as you can see, we compare pretty favorably to other districts in terms of the number of days, the hours per day, and the total number of hours. And so I really want to thank the board for the support to open early and the push to open early. And you're right out of the gate with the governor's announcement. We were working collaboratively to make this happen. I just really appreciate your push and your support in that, and the support of our team. And I think we got a pretty good result out of it. Director Adamson.
Well, just to not put too fine a point on it, what I'm seeing there is that we've got 30% more hours for K-1 than the second highest district that we're looking at here, right?
That is correct.
Jessica?
Yeah, I just want to clarify for friends at home, WLWV is Westland Wilsonville, and TTSD is Tiger Tualatin School District.
Thank you for that. I did not think about that when I put this together. I look at those acronyms so much that they're second nature to me. That is an important clarification. And you're correct in that we have significantly more, 30% more hours in the next closest district. And you might recall that we made some really intentional decisions in the summer in planning for this before we even knew when we were going to open or under what conditions. We had some ideas, but we focused originally, you might recall, on bringing K3 back. That was our original push out of the gate, was to focus on bringing K3 back. And we made some decisions where we moved a specialist as a classroom teacher. When we realized we couldn't do pre-K, we made our pre-K teachers primary teachers. And then when it came in, those decisions we made early on back in the summer, in the early days, made a big difference. And so thank you for your support in those. And I think it made a big difference in where we landed. You'll see that when we move to, this is all elementary. So this is when they got all their elementary students in for in-person instruction. You can see we have a little bit fewer hours, but still significantly more than other districts in the metro area. And some of those decisions we made with K3 helped us out. We also ended up, you might recall, when we opened for in-person instruction, a bunch of students moved to the cloud campus, and we hired 6 new cloud campus teachers. Some of those investments that we made as a district really helped us to do this and get these students in school in person every day. So we're really proud about that. Any questions or comments before I move to the next one?
Jessica?
Yeah, I just was gonna say, if you can't see the chart online, we're the only district in the comparable districts that we're often compared to in the metro area. We're the only ones where elementary school kids are going 5 days a week. And that's amazing. 5 days for real time in the classroom. And I think that is emblematic of Sherwood as a district and the work that we do to put kids first. I just think this is amazing. And I just really want to make sure that if you're listening to this online and you can't see the screen, that you know we're the only ones doing 5 days a week.
And that was prioritized in the summer, bringing students back 5 days a week. When I said bringing students back, I meant 5 days a week. That was our priority from the start back in the day, bringing our youngest learners in every day for a week. That's where we thought we could make that happen. Middle school, similar. We've had a successful launch at middle school. We were in our second day of school with all the kids back today. You can see that the difference isn't as significant with middle school, but you can see that we're still higher than the other districts, and 2.5 days a week for a long school day, 27 days in person, shakes out to be a pretty good number. And things are often going well. It's also worth noting that the middle school students, that we were able to create an instructional model where the cloud campus students are separate, and there's also some benefits to instruction in the middle school, and that's a really nice thing for the cloud campus kids, and a good instructional model we've got going at the middle school.
Well, and the gap isn't big between us and Wilsonville, but you get further down the list and our kids are in school almost double what most of those other districts are.
Correct. Yeah, I have to say I was honestly a little bit shocked by the difference when we put the numbers together and when we started compiling the vast differences.
So I guess I'd like to say, you look at how hard these numbers were to get now. I mean, I think they were even harder when we were trying to come up with a decision back in March. I mean, you were looking at, there were announcements being made, there were districts walking steps back. And I think part of the reason why we were able to do this was we were meeting every week. We were having open discussions. We were hearing a lot of different viewpoints and trying to come to a point where we were doing what was best for our kids, and not necessarily looking what everybody else was doing, but doing what's best for our kids. And and trying to get everybody back. And I guess for me, this is just kind of a good example what happens when everybody just kind of works together, and we kind of plan this thing out from the beginning.
I agree. Go slow to go fast. Took our time in the process, met every week, listened to stakeholders, all types of stakeholders, built a plan that worked, and then executed it without having to step anything back or have a false start. We were able to execute what we said we did, and we did it when we said we would do it. And I think you're right. It's all that collaborative work that comes together.
Sue?
Well, there are a couple of things, when I look at these, this data, I'm glad that in Sherwood we were able to do what we've been able to do, and hopefully that continues. I really feel for some of these districts that just can't get kids in more. To be honest, I feel so fortunate that in Sherwood, because of the community, because of your work with kids that are in the cloud campus, because of our new buildings and the room that we have in this district, we're really fortunate to have some space to actually get these students back, and all the work that it's taken. If we were crowded as we were a couple of years ago, that would really be difficult. So we're so fortunate that as a whole, we've just been able to do this work, and it really, every day matters, every hour counts for these kids. So I'm thrilled that it's certainly not perfect. It's obviously we want to see more, like we will in the fall, but I'm pleased that we're able to do what we're doing. So thank you.
Yeah, it's true. It would be I had this a little bit later in the presentation, but our facilities make a big difference in terms of having the space to spread kids out. A lot of this is about density, and we have some learning spaces that really are able to accommodate kids in ways that other districts just simply don't. That makes a huge difference. So on to the high school. This is the lone place where we're not at the top, but we're near the top. And Westland Wilsonville opened their high school quite a while ago. They were able to open quite early. You can see we have a longer school day, but they have more half day a week, and you can see the numbers speak for themselves. Here, we're still in really good shape in terms of what our high school is doing and offering to kids. This is the most complex level to open. Real challenges, instructionally as well as logistically, just the way the kids mix together. Some of the changes in guidance we'll talk about really helped out with this. So some of the challenges that they face at the high school just aren't seen by other levels across the board. And that's why you see the numbers smaller across schools as well.
Yeah, Mike.
Sue already mentioned it, but it's worth stating again. I mean, the bond that we did 4 years ago really gave us the opportunity to be able to do this, to have space at the high school, middle school, and elementary school to absolutely pull this off. And it's because of the support of this community and the work that so many people did. This wouldn't have happened without that.
For sure.
I think one more thing we also did in the bond too, which had a huge impact on here, was we were actually able to invest in technology. We're able to get those Chromebooks out there, and I can't even imagine what this would have looked like if we were, like some other areas, scrambling, trying to get machines out to kids. And so I think the support we get from this community, I think this was a really, really rough year, but you look at the space, you look at the Chromebooks, everything that the bond was able to get us. It's very, very thankful that happened.
Well, and that given the size and scope and what we bought for the bond and what we've gotten for it on the upside, if the downside of that is a minor ding to our credit rating, I think the payoff is huge. Jessica.
Yeah, I also want to highlight that these things don't just happen overnight, that we've been in conversations as a board and as a district about how do we get kids back since the moment that frankly they left last year. That this wasn't, that you can't just make a decision and next week open. It has been a process of responding to guidance, of learning what we didn't know that we didn't know. And as a district, continuing to work at this and develop a plan all the way along and out. This is what's represented on these boards is hours of the best thinking and learning from other places that have gone before us, and how can we do this and be in compliance with Ready School Safe Learners and all of those things. I think for our community, it's really, really important to know that this has been a process that has taken us a year, but it's been a continual process of work to get us where we wanted to go, which is kids back. And I'm really proud of these numbers up here, but I also really, and it is possible because of the investments made by this community and in the time and the talent that we have in this district to think through all of the challenges and how do we come back and how do we do that safely so that we can have a sustainable model that keeps kids in schools.
Onward.
Thank you. So we did want to address the new Ready School Safe Learners guidance that came out. There's been a lot of this in the press. I'm sure you heard about it. There's a couple major changes in guidance. Kind of the two headline numbers are the first two bullet points there. For one, the limit of 100 student, the cohort size of 100 student limit has been taken away. And changes in calculations from a density of 35 square foot per person in the classroom to spacing students to 3 feet of physical distancing between students. And so those have been very helpful, especially the lunch thing, and especially the cohort thing really helps with mixing at lunches at the high school and things of that nature. And it's really helped. We talked about our facilities. It's really helped in some districts where they just did not have the size of classrooms and the spaces that we have in our district to spread kids out. And it really made a difference for a lot of those to be able to come back at all. Couple things that didn't really change, but were added back in. They're not changes because it was sort of 35 square feet per person. It's basically 6 feet, physical distancing. But when they went to 3 feet of physical distance, a couple things were added back. There's a requirement of maintaining 6 feet of distance between staff and students, and including a pathway for a teacher to move through the room, maintaining that distance, and 6 feet of social distancing or physical distancing at lunchtime or other times when masks aren't present. So those are a couple of changes to the guidance, which make a lot of sense. Actually, when kids are sitting down at tables, they shouldn't be 3 feet apart without masks on. That puts them in a tough position. So those are some things we're working through at the high school and middle school. But all in all, those are really helpful changes to us, but still have some limits because one of our challenges at the high school, for example, is just lunch. If you had the whole high school come back at the same time and you had 1,200 kids eating lunch, pretty hard to be 6 feet apart when you have that many kids on campus. Even with the kids that leave campus for lunch and things like that, there's still just a big population of people that you're trying to work through with that. And then classrooms have some similar challenges in maintaining that space. These are some unchanged pieces of guidance that I think are worth noting that, and when you have classes like band and choir where you have this increased exhalation, there's still a 6 foot of distancing required, which makes a lot of sense. If you think about it, you're really vaporizing. You're sending out a lot of, the virus is airborne. In dance and theater, you have to have 10 to 12 feet. And if there's a requirement that large classes in these are actually broken into smaller classes. And so those are some things that remain in the guidance that make a lot of sense. We're still in the middle of a pandemic with case rates, moving. And so making sure we're keeping these things in place that keep our kids and our teachers safe, and do what we can do to make for a successful opening next fall and keep things under control for now. And then on to what's next. Oh, before I do that, any questions about the guidance before I move on? I didn't mean to just jump past that. Okay.
So just to be clear, these are the kinds of requirements that make it difficult for us to just say everybody back all at the same time, because we still have challenges around, even with beautiful facilities that are big and new, there just still isn't enough space for us to have all of the high schoolers on campus at the same time, even in 2 lunches, trying to figure out how we keep people far enough apart to maintain distance there or in the walkways, that kind of thing, where we still have guidance.
Yeah, for sure. It's a significant challenge where they're from the lunch spaces to, do you take the band class and how do you deal with a band class, for example, that's that large? Or how do you deal with, there's just real challenges and limits to doing it, because Those changes to the guidance did not pull away all the restrictions. They pulled away some of the restrictions. And so that's, yes, I think that's an accurate statement. So just in terms of what we're thinking about next, Dr. Cordy talked a little bit about, we're exploring some opportunities to bring some of our most vulnerable students on campus or on campus more frequently. One concrete example of that is, we have a lot of elementary students in the cloud, and we're reaching out to some families of kids who just aren't engaging and trying to get them to come into our classrooms, come back in person, because we think it'll make a big difference for them. And this, is helpful with that. We're also really excited, as Dr. Cordy said in her report earlier, when we're talking about next year, we're thinking about kids being here full-time and every day, in person, and all kids. And that's what we're really working towards. That's what our planning has been towards. And we're thinking about how best to make that happen given what we know now. And so that's really, really exciting for us. More exciting for our kids and families, but really, really exciting. And we're also exploring opportunities for a cloud campus for families who choose it. So there are families for whom that model worked well. And so we're looking at possibilities to see what that might look like for kids. But it will be an opportunity for some kids, but we're planning on most kids being back in person. And we're also looking at developing a robust summer program. We've learned recently the details of the governor's, the $250 million proposed by the governor several months ago, I think is now passed the House and the Senate. I'm not sure if it's been signed by the governor or not, but it's close. We learned some details around that, and there's substantial funding for districts to build a robust summer program, which is really exciting. And so we'll focus on credit recovery for high school students, which is what the legislation requires and what we would do anyway. And when we start talking about our K-8 kids, it's really connections with peers, social and emotional supports, academic skill building, and really just this recovering, learning, reconnecting kind of approach. And so that's really exciting, and more information to come about that as we start to learn more about what that looks like. Any questions?
So in terms of summer programming and just kind of thinking about the calendar coming, our next meeting is in May. I would imagine parents are going to be interested in learning as soon as they can about what to plan for and what's available and those kinds of things. Can you talk a little bit more about how we're going to lay out the timeline for summer?
We think we have a timeline for our the timeline is essentially the first 4 weeks of summer is what we're looking at right now, is connecting it right to that. That's when we seem to have gotten the most kids in the past, when we don't take a break and then try to get kids to come back. That seems to work well, and compacting it into that part. So that's what we're looking at right now. We've also discussed doing some stuff with high school students potentially in late August, like a transition, an 8-9 bridge program and a 9-10 bridge program. We'll see how that shakes out and what we're able to do with that. Those are some things we're looking into right now. But
so I think, borrowing from our experience with building the new high school, if we could start talking about 70% design, description of what it is and what the calendar looks like just as soon as possible, I think that would be wise.
I would for sure agree with that. And we've had it sort of laid out. We just really wanted to see what the funds, we didn't know if there was any restrictions on timelines for the funds. And so we just wanted to see what that looked like. We got that on Friday. And so we'll get this plan a little bit more built and get some of that information out to people. I know our Summer Institute folks are really itching to get this out. And so we'll get to work on that. I totally agree. We've got to get people knowing what's out there, and we got to get kids excited about it and families excited about it and ready to come in and take advantage of it.
Jessica.
It may be useful, given that this is going to be pretty different than what is normally offered during Summer Institute, to think maybe about calling it something different this year.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I'm like so robotic about Summer Institute that we are looking at different names, and it will not be called Summer Institute. We're trying to honestly develop a name that really is more what it is, Summer Learning and Connection, or something along those lines that explains what it is, instead of something that sounds exactly like what we've done before, because it will be more robust and a little bit different looking opportunities for kids. Thank you, Director Adamson, for the reminder. We've talked about that several times, and I have a feeling I might be talking about that with Dr. Cordy a little bit later. Okay. Thank you for your time.
All right. Next up is the district 2021-2022 district calendar. Mr. Emmert.
I will hold it. Good evening, Dr. Cordy.
Now you're contaminating the mic for anybody who follows you.
What's that?
You're contaminating the mic.
Well, I am not
Yeah.
sure.
Go ahead.
I can bend if that helps. Good evening, Dr. Cordy, Board Chair Allen, Board of Directors, and Ainsley. Welcome. All right, I will contaminate the mic. So as we typically do, the district builds a district calendar for the following school year. We're later in our process this year because of all of the complications with COVID and all the uncertainties, but here we are tonight presenting the 21-22 district calendar. As we typically do, the dates of importance reflect contractual commitments, state and federal guidelines, student and staff needs, and we try to stay as closely aligned as we can with the Oregon University system. We worked as we always do with OSEA, SEA, district and building administrators to build the calendar. We consider preserving academic time, considering natural breaks in the calendar to end trimesters, preserving as many uninterrupted weeks as we can, balancing trimester lengths, considering historical data regarding low attendance days and weeks, strategically placing early release days. We need to stay within our 190 full contract days and 175 class or conference days. And then we have 5 paid holidays and some professional development and teacher work days. This coming year in the calendar, you'll see that as we typically do for families and staff, we start after Labor Day. This year, because Rosh Hashanah falls on September 7th, and we wanted to avoid that as our first day to start school, we turned that into a day for staff to reach out and connect with students and families. And so the first day for 1st through 5th graders, 6th and 9th graders will be September 8th. So it'll be a Wednesday this year. Followed the following day as the first day for the rest, grades 7 and 8 and 10 and 12, and then the following week pre-K and K as we typically do. Spring break will fall the same week on the calendar as it typically does, and then we try to keep graduation typically the same week. So in this calendar, it would be June 10th. We tried to balance trimesters. Calendar allows work days to be adjacent to weekends for teachers and families. And so unless there are questions or discussion, I'll be bringing the calendar back during the action items tonight. Yes, ma'am.
Jessica.
Yeah, I just want to clarify again for our friends at home. We are returning to, as we told everyone we would, we are returning to a trimester system for all grades. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And also, at least the Adamson family is a huge fan of this. We have a whole week at Thanksgiving.
We do. We were able to add back a full week of Thanksgiving and 2 full weeks at the winter break.
Again, big fans. Thank you.
Any other questions or applause?
I love applause, so feel free.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Next up is public comment. I think we have a couple. Ms. Andrack. Actually, I will say we did receive one comment that doesn't comply with district policy, and so we won't be reading that one into the record, but we have 2 others that do. One, excuse me.
Yes, thank you. We have one additional comment. Okay, comment submitted by Eric Flister at 22206 Southwest Bouchon Terrace. When the board decided to reopen in-person instruction, they promised they would reverse course if community COVID rates started increasing. Well, until the 2nd week in March, Oregon's closed schools had maintained our status as having the lowest rates in the contiguous 48. Since then, just after you started opening schools, Oregon's rates started increasing even while other states continued to improve. Now we are worse than 10 other states in the contiguous 48, our worst ranking of the entire pandemic. Tell us what explains this. Our business and public restrictions continue to match the rest of the country. Opening schools is what changed. Now that our school policy looks like the rest of the country, so will our fourth wave, unlike the previous three. So much for Oregon. How about Washington County? Since you started opening schools, our case rate stopped decreasing. Instead, it has doubled. Our test positivity has doubled. Our hospitalization rate has doubled. How about 97140? 16 new cases this week, 15 last week, 14 the week before that. That's 3 times the rate just before you started opening schools. You said you could open safely. You said you would prove it by paying attention to community rates. You pointed to a Harvard report. You didn't specify that the report was never peer reviewed. You didn't specify that of the 15 authors, only 3 have expertise in epidemiology. Why didn't you tell the public that the other 12 are a political theorist, a political philosopher, a sociologist, an education philosopher, an education policy specialist, a journalist, an economist, a business management ethicist, a behavioral psychologist, an architect, a medical device engineer, and a gastroenterological surgeon? Of the epidemiologists, only 2 have published any peer-reviewed studies of COVID and only 1 relevant to schools. He emphasizes these 3 points. Everyone in schools must use N95 masks. Homemade and surgical masks are not effective enough. Are you making sure Sherwood schools adhere to that? Number 2, school ventilation systems must provide 4 to 6 air changes per hour in order to be safe, but typical schools max out at 1.5. Why won't you measure this value in every room in our schools and keep the public informed of the risk you're imposing on us? Number 3, toilet flushing, especially without lids, is extremely effective at spreading COVID. What measures have you taken to address this? Instead of misrepresenting this political committee as scientific experts, why haven't you responded to the 10 peer-reviewed epidemiology studies published in top journals showing that closing schools was consistently the policy that led to the largest reduction in community cases? Oh, you're listening to the CDC. Well, remember when they told us not to wear masks? If that was a fluke, then why don't you discuss their study from 6 weeks ago where they traced 14 cases in mask using elementary schools that directly infected more than 4 community members each? And that's 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. Next up are action items. We'll call Mr. Emmert back to the podium where he can fix the microphone that he dropped for adoption of the calendar.
As soon as I regain my composure here. So based on the calendar information I just presented, tonight we're bringing the 2021-2022 district calendar for first read and for adoption. And so tonight, unless there are further questions or discussion, we ask that the board would adopt the 21-22 district calendar.
Your motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the the 2021-2022 academic calendar as presented.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Calendar's adopted. Mr. Emmert, first read on board policy, is it EEA? Yeah, EEA.
It is, thank you. So in February 2021, at our school board meeting, the school board approved the supplemental plan for transportation. Within the plan, the transportation to and from school is not provided for students living outside of 1 mile at the elementary level and outside of 1.5 miles at the secondary level within those walk boundaries. Due to the change at the middle level, we need to update our board policy, which currently states elementary students in grades K through 8 who live 1 mile from school will be transported, and secondary schools in grades 9 through 12 who live 1.5 miles will be transported. The new policy will read, students in grades K through 5 who live 1 mile from the school will be transported, and secondary students in grades 6 through 12 who live 1.5 miles from the school will be transported. Tonight, we're just presenting this for first read and review, and we'll be bringing it back to the May board meeting for further review and adoption.
So I think maybe you said something backwards at the beginning of that.
Did I?
It's people beyond 1 mile or 1.5 miles get transported, and people within that don't.
So the people who live
a mile or more,
a mile or more,
or a mile and a half or more.
or a
depending on
mile
the
and a half
level.
or more are transported, yes.
Got it, okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Any questions?
Questions?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bennett, Board Policy IKFAR.
Thank you, Director Allen. Earlier tonight, staff presented on a graduation policy requirements change, on a graduation requirements change related to a change in our social studies course structure and course alignment. This policy, IKFAR, it's actually IKFAR 1 and 2 is the way it is. One for the class up until the class of 2024, and then the changes for the class of 2025 and beyond. And tonight, we're asking that that policy go up for first read and review. We'll come back next month for adoption.
And just to reiterate sort of the simple point for people who maybe haven't had kids in high school before, once you're in, we don't change the graduation goalposts. That stays the same based on what you started out and the track you're on. Changes would be incoming freshmen and beyond, right?
That is correct. Once a student starts in high school, we would not and cannot change the graduation requirement. So this affects incoming freshmen and younger.
Great. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll get an opportunity if anyone would like to make any comments and reflection or observation or anything that's gone on that they want to talk about. Why do I think Sue wants Mike?
Well, I hope I'm not stealing a little bit of your thunder. Well, I have 2 points to make. First off, I wanted to express my own thanks to the principal, Tim Smith at Archer Glen. I got a chance to work with him extensively on the board of Sherwood Education Foundation. We always have an administrative rep on the board. And in my time there, I worked with Gary. And when Gary moved on, I thought we would never get another Gary because he worked with us so well. But Tim really stepped up. He really values the role that parent volunteers play, and he gave us the support we needed. The second point was just being present at the opening of the middle school and welcoming kids back. The teachers do such a professional job. They were so helpful. It was so great to see some of the improvements in the building, the security fence around the activities entrance, for lack of a better word, that the bond provided for. It makes that building a middle school. And so it was good to see some of those things. And really am grateful for the staff and all the great work that they do. And we have a lot to be proud of in Sherwood. We are coming back, and it's really good to be back.
Thank you. Eric?
So I just wanted to take a moment and kind of give a shout out to our CTE department, our Career Technical Education up at the high school. As some of you know me, I'm a longtime supporter of our STEM and CTE work. And, I've been saying for a long time that we have one of the best programs in the country. And I know we have the best program in the state. There's a story up on KGW right now, and there was a couple great press articles on there kind of talking about some of the work that our Woods teacher and our metals teacher was able to do, interacting with some of the local contractors and kind of showing these kids some career opportunities. We've had, the CBS National News, we have PBS National News coming in and checking out our CTE program, which I think is just absolutely amazing. And you look at our town and, we have one of the highest graduation rates in the state. And as we were looking earlier today on the social studies curriculum adoption, we mentioned the Sherwood diploma, and we have the Oregon State requirements, and then we have the Sherwood diploma, which is a little bit more rigorous program because I think it helps kids in the next step of whatever they decide to do academically. And so you take that combination along with our CTE program, and the fact that we're able to retain these things for so long. And execute them at such a high level, I think this does a wonderful opportunity for our kids, which is another reason I was excited when you hear that we can start off, the freshmen can start taking another elective, because the opportunities that they have there are just amazing. Now, I've been teaching after-school coding classes for many years, and I found that there's only 1 in 5 high schools in the state actually have a single coding class, and we have a full-time computer science teacher who's been here for 10 years. And on Monday, I was able to give a presentation at a teacher conference about how to introduce coding to kids. And I think it was at that point where I kind of really realized kind of how special it was that we actually have these opportunities and we've been able to retain these opportunities through the years, because you hear how many other districts are just starting to introduce this. And you look at the skill set that our kids are going to need, especially, if you look at the 6th graders who are starting to get some basics on coding and computers and how all that works. I think it's going to do them well as they grow into adulthood and need living wage jobs, which we're introducing at this level, and we're showing kids these pathways into these things at our CTE program at the high school. So if you get a chance, check out that story on our CTE program up on KGW. Sue?
Well, I'm just super excited to talk about being at 10 first day mornings. I got invitations to be at the first days for elementaries and middle school, and it worked out. I was able to swing in and stand out there in the parent drop-off lines, and it was just incredible. It was just such a bright spot and such a great reminder of how awesome the kids are and why we all do this. But really, it was also a testament to, the students who were incredibly amazing. They're so cute, especially the little guys. But even the middle schoolers that would let me ask them questions. But to see, they were nervous, they were anxious. It was just like any other first day. But the smiles when they were released and hearing the stories of how awesome it was for them to be back is really great. But, not only did it take the students, the parents that are patient as we all discover how the new drop-offs work and the new entrances and exits, but really also for the teams, that the one thing that we really don't think about a whole lot is all of the preparation and what happens inside the school. The amount of cleaning, the amount of safety protocols in place that everyone is learning, and the students have learned so well with the procedures and processes, is just a huge lift, but so worth it when you see these kids. So I just can't wait to be in parent drop-off line for high school. So a couple more to go. And anyway, it's great to have them back. So thank you.
Jessica?
Yeah, I'd just like to talk about on April 2nd, the home game that happened at Sherwood High School. And as a band parent, being able to be there with the band, getting to play, watching our football team just stomp Liberty. It was very rewarding. It was great. Watching the students in the stands. I'm sure that I saw you, Ainsley, cheering loudly with the cheerleaders doing such a great job, and the dance team. It was a Friday night in April. It felt like it could have been a Friday night in October. It was very cold, but it just for a moment, even with the masks and the distancing and all of that, it all felt normal. And those things don't just happen. There's a ton of work that went into making that happen. Ken, you and your team, and Randy and Principal Barron and her whole team to make that possible was amazing. But it was a beautiful night, and we have, as a community, are going to have many great nights ahead at that stadium. And so I can't wait until next fall when the entire community hopefully will be able to come and see those games and just cheer on those kids, because it was remarkable, and we won, so that was great too. But it was really great to see everyone there, just watching kids play football, the band playing, and the kids cheering. It was great.
Okay. Thanks everyone for those comments. Our next board meeting will be on Wednesday, May 12th, and we are adjourned.